One of the problems with having so much to say is it becomes increasingly impossible to limit those thoughts to one specific topic at a depth that's appropriate for general audience. So it's a very tough tightrope to walk. Um, and so as a result, I end up making far fewer videos than I otherwise might. This is similar to the fact that I blog a lot less than I could. Um, and I try to divert most of that to the books to build up the prerequisite base of understanding, to allow a return to specific topics at some undetermined future date. So one trick to help focus the message is pulling or leaning on visceral general experience. And so if you speak in English, you're adopting a vocabulary that's understood by many people. And even though there are diversities of understanding or command of the language amongst those people, there are generalities where there's some consistent benefit across people. And so one visceral, so Jesus used this, and that's one reason why he taught in parables, is that he could minimize the ratio. He could minimize the ratio of new and different to familiar and well known. So it's easy to trip the fight or flight mechanism in people when you're teaching. And so a good teacher will attempt to minimize that. And they'll save their shock and awe for the things that can't be conveyed in some other way. So I frequently draw on the example of, or the pattern of dating, so youthful relationships. I know older people date and older people get married, but I think that that's a very different ball of wax. And so there are tons of applications for principles that work well with dating to other facets of life. And this is one reason why I drone on endlessly about this. The other being that there are a lot of false ideas out there about relationships, and it's immensely important to do this right. And the consequences of this, as with all other important decisions, the consequences of this are going to be more apparent and extreme in our time and moving forward. This will not be like times past where, for living memory, this didn't really matter too much. I mean, it matters a lot, but the perspective, and people would agree that it matters a lot, but in their actions, they treat it, and too many still do today, as if you can throw a dart at the dartboard and whoever you hit will be comparable in quality to who you would find in a much more principled search. And that's just not true. It's not true for spouses. It's not true for jobs, careers. It's not true for basically any major decision in life anymore. Where you live, all the big decisions matter a lot. Turns out that many of the seemingly small decisions matter a lot too, but I digress. Okay, so on to dating. Recently, I had a chain of, and this is typically what happens, I'll have a chain of experiences and it sort of bubbles up the priority of saying something about it, and then I can put it away, or at least divert to writing about it in books and not burn too much time on that. So there's a set of things that's sort of an ongoing body of work, and then there's the set of things that are they're more, I don't want to say reactionary, but they're more responsive to actual circumstances in life and interactions I have with people. And so that's like a work list that I constantly have to pare down so I can get back to this. So that's what this is. So I'm going to emit a little bit about relationships, and then I can go back to scheduled programming, meaning the writing that I'm doing. All right, so recently I had a chain of experiences. One of them was I watched a video, which I wish was a little bit better. It was of an older woman giving some relationship advice. So much of what she said was rock solid, but she laced the whole thing with toxic falsehood. And I don't want to poison people by forwarding that on. So I'll filter out, I'll take the good, add more good, filter out the bad. Of course, according to my perspective, which may or may not agree. Well, I hope it doesn't agree with your perspective, because otherwise, why would you watch this? But you may or may not find value in that, and that's fine. Wisdom's known of her children, so you go with what you believe, and at the end of the day, we'll compare where we ended up. So there's not enough of that, by the way. The return and analyze the effects to integrate that into our perspectives moving forward. There's far too little reflection going on. But anywho, so her main thesis was, ladies, if you're not married by 30, you've really messed up, and your pool of options has shrunk down to basically nothing. I completely agree with that. Couldn't agree more. She gave some compelling reasons for this, namely that a guy who's got his act together is already gone by that age. And we're going to come back to that. I also went to a barbecue recently of sorts, and most of the people there I'd qualify as my wife's friends. And so this is nice because I get to have the color of a social experience without having any responsibilities to people please. And all of her friends know I'm a weirdo anyway, and probably would prefer for me to say less. So I really have a long leash at these things, and it's nice. I can go, this person has a cow, so I went to pet the cow. So I like animals, and have fun conversations with these two little kids that were scared to pet the cow. I noticed this, and I went over there and made sure they weren't scared to pet the cow, because I could tell they really wanted to. Fun stuff like that. There's a dog, and now that dog's my best. I'm that dog's best friend. He was just off the charts happy. So anyway, I'm sitting there shoving burgers in my face, and quite exhausted, by the way. I think I had gotten up pretty early that morning. And that's also a really nice thing, is to make sure I'm really tired by the time I get around other people. It's a nice filter on what I might otherwise say or do, because I just don't have enough juice in the batteries left. Anywho, so I overheard some things, and it was wonderful because my mind wasn't working at the time. I didn't adequately process what I was hearing, but as commonly happens, the morning after an experience, when I have fresh energy, my mind is just on overdrive, and I'll reprocess all these things involuntarily. Mostly it's subconscious. It'll jump up to the forefront and have all these thoughts. And luckily for my wife's friends, these thoughts were not in my head during the event, because I absolutely would have shared them. I can guarantee that they wouldn't have liked that. So let's get to it without going too much. I will mention specifically some things I heard, but I'm not going to do the play-by-play. All right, ladies, here's the problem. Okay, so historically, you could just sit back and live your life, and guys would come to you, and they'd ask you out in high volume. Even if you weren't at the top of your game, they'd come and ask you out. There was just a number of men who would do this. Every lady, pretty much, would get attention from men. But the problem is you peed in the pool, and guys aren't swimming in it anymore. Women are still very picky. Arguably, they're a lot more picky than they used to be. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I've spoken about this often. I think if anything, they should be more picky. So that part I don't think is a bad idea. And I won't go into all the reasons for that again in this video. But there's some percent of men that any given woman will find suitable. What that percent is going to differ from person to person. Who those people are will differ from person to person, but not as much as people would like to think, which exacerbates the problem because you've got 80% of women chasing 20% of guys. That happens. Okay, that's not a made-up statistic. That's a real situation. In fact, it's 10% of guys, to be honest. So that's a big problem. So instead of sitting back and having this sea of men, and then you can pick the set of men who are above whatever your threshold is, which is going to be a small percent. Instead of that, women are getting asked out by almost nobody. There are a lot of young 20-somethings out there that have never been on a date. A lot. And the percentage is increasing. And it used to be that was only true for someone who's just bound to be a spinster, who's just not attractive in any way to men. But there are women who have things to offer who are in that set, including looks, which should be an attractant, right? Because it's something you can see from afar. No one can see, your heart from a distance. So, or whatever other internal property you might have. So, this is a real problem. And what the typical approach is that a woman will look into her passive circles, her friend group, her social group, maybe in kind of traditionally oriented families, the friends of the family group, whatever their passive circles are, they'll look at the set of guys who are single and say, like, the best one, whatever their ranking strategy is, the best one, I wish this guy would ask me out. So there are situations where no one's above threshold. But whether that's the case or this is the case, it doesn't matter. That's one way of handling it. And unfortunately, this is the way the ladies do it still. And it boggles my mind why they think that that's going to be sufficient. On the other hand, you could make a list of what you want and then strategize about how to find that kind of guy. Now, I'll tell you why this is a horrific idea in the minds of most young ladies. The old way conforms to female nature. Females hate being rejected. They hate it. And so when the guys come to them, it's impossible for them to be rejected. I mean, the guy can dump you later on, but it's your game to lose, right? If you're approaching the man, you can and will be rejected. Now, guys have lower standards than girls, but they still have standards. And if a guy doesn't find you attractive, he's going to tell you to get lost. And he might be polite about that, but it doesn't seem to matter much to most ladies. They really don't like getting rejected. Then there's the whole facet of having to do something. So it's not just passive, live your life, and as long as you take care of yourself, guys will come to you. But you just get to go do whatever you want. And everything you ever do becomes an opportunity to meet men. Well, that's very different than strategically targeting what you're looking for and going out and finding that guy. That's a chore. And ladies don't like that. They like to just do what everyone else is doing and have a fun time. And this is very different than that. It's not what other ladies do, which is good because you'll be the first one to the trough. And there's less competition if you live this way. Eventually, more women are going to figure this out, and they're going to do this. They're going to be out there getting a job at a bank, getting a job at Home Depot or whatever, instead of getting this office job that no guy is going to talk to them because you can't hit on fellow employees anymore. She'll get accused of something and fired. So you get a job where customers might hit on you, and then you get to search for them that way, whatever. And there are intrinsic filters here. If a guy's shopping at Home Depot or Lowe's, he knows how to build stuff, so he's probably not a soy boy, and he might be a contractor of some sort, and so he has a trade and he has an income. And this isn't a surefire way to check all the boxes, but the point is you're proactively going out to where these guys are found and then filtering that subset down to the subset you actually want, rather than just looking at the general population as if any significant number of those guys will qualify, and they won't, and treating this like your parents and grandparents did, which you will absolutely not be successful in doing it that way. So let's shed more light on how bad the situation is. There are websites out there that have collated statistics from the census that can tell you percentage of men within certain ages that are single and making so much money or whatever, anything that's on the census. The problem is that this does not include the set of criteria that should also be included in your search that isn't recorded on the census. Even with those percentages alone, it's real obvious that you're dealing with an extremely small set of people, okay? This is not you're not going to solve this problem by meeting people at a bar or going to church. That's just not going to work. And you're not going to solve this problem by looking at people you go to school with or whatever. It's a much smaller set than that will capture, than will be captured by that. So what are some of these things that the census doesn't track? Do you realize that more than half of guys in their 20s are living with their parents? So how do you filter for that? Because if you're meeting them in any kind of social situation, you're not going to know. And then you've wasted all this time. If you're at a party, say, and there are 50 guys there, statistically speaking, half of them live with their parents. So how are you going to filter for that set so that you can focus your time on the other half of guys? And frankly, who does that? Because if you go to a party, you're not going to be thinking, who are the successful men here? You're like, oh, he's cute. Oh, he's cute. Who cares? Sort that out later. Sort that out from the set of people that match all the other criteria. This goes for guys too, but there just aren't very many criteria for guys. That's a different topic. But for the ladies, that's what you ought to be doing. Almost all men are addicted to porn. Period. This is just as true in churches as it outside of churches. There's no statistical difference with porn use, which is pathetic, but it's true. And so you go to church to pick through guys, pretty much all of them are on porn. So if it's important to you that that's not the case, you need some other filter, okay? Now the good news is that all good things grow together, just like all bad things decay together. So while it's not a guarantee that the presence of something good implies something else that's good that's less visible, these are correlations. So your best bet is to find the people that have improved the most. And what that means, you get to figure out, right? But what you're looking for are people that have risen above the masses, who have become better than everyone else. And again, you get to define what that means. But that's absolutely what you need to be looking for. So, as a piece of this, we have to address the fact that the higher the quality of the man that you seek, the higher quality you will have to be for him to give you the time of day. Low quality men, which is almost all men, will be swayed by good looks. And a lot of low quality men will be swayed by just female attention. They're absolute losers, and so if anyone gives them attention, They're looking for a same-aged mommy. They want to find someone to take the place of their mother and be their mommy and be around them all the time and making them feel good about themselves and giving them stuff. You probably don't want that. So if you're looking for a high quality man, you're not looking for that. What you're looking for is someone who's trying to maximize what they're able to give to another person. That's what high quality men seek to maximize. They're searching for a woman whose life will be most improved as a result of who he is and what he does. That's what they want. So they're looking for the maximum window of receipt. Now, a giant part of that is the value she places in his high quality. Meaning, if a woman searches for a man in the same exact way any woman searches for any man, she absolutely does not understand the value of a high value man, and he will not acknowledge her. Very important. So, to put this into practice, a high quality man would never ever pick up a woman at a bar. If you're going to a bar to meet men, and the guy happens to be at a bar, because it's not necessarily the case a high quality man would never go to a bar. There might be a compelling reason for that, but it will never be to meet women, because he will regard women who pick up men at bars as low quality, as someone who's not going to recognize his value, because she's treating him the same way as everybody else. Same goes for church, same goes for school, on and on and on. You understand? If you're dating, let's say I go to Home Depot and I see this young lady working there. She doesn't have a ring on her finger, and I'm a single guy in this scenario, and I say something that's a pickup line enough that she recognizes this is a sign to show interest or not, and she shows interest and whatever. We go on a date, and like, tell me more about your decision to work at Home Depot, not in so many words. And she's like, yeah, well, to be totally honest, I thought I could learn some things while I was there and also meet higher quality people. She doesn't have to say I got a job at Home Depot so I could find my husband. Although I wouldn't mind someone being that blunt. It'd be refreshing. Most people would be taken aback by that. So that's a plus in the pros column, right? Because that means that she knows enough about the value of a high value man. She appreciates that enough to go out of her way, break social convention, because she's not working some lame office job where she's like the VP of coworker feelings or something. She's actually doing something valuable and meeting valuable people and not just going with the crowd. So that's great. She's figured out what she wants. She's making decisions to move towards that, to make it more likely. Cool, right? Or if you meet someone at a networking event for a chamber of commerce, that's not what young ladies get excited about. They're not like texting each other, oh, this Friday, what's going on? Oh, there's a chamber of commerce event. Awesome, let's go and pick up some guys, right? So if you meet a lady at a chamber of commerce event and you're a professional, high quality man who's single, who's interested, looking for love, and you're like, oh, so what do you do? And you say like, oh, well, I do this thing and it's totally unrelated to anything here. It's like, oh, well, why, what made you come to this event? That's curious. You say like, oh, well, I'm just always looking to meet high quality people, right? So it doesn't have to be awkward, but high quality men want to know, they need signs that you understand the value of a high quality man. And so what that consists of is what you're willing to do to look for him. That's really all they have to go off of. Also, decisions you've made to stay away from trashy things. So like if you have sleeve tattoos and your phone has finger marks on the case because you use it so often, then that's probably a red flag. Or like you're having a conversation with someone and they look at their phone, that's a red flag. Done, right? That's all it takes. It's a deal breaker. So there are indications that you appreciate value, and that's very important. So what are the signs that you're willing to pay a price? Like distance. What distance do you encompass in your search radius? What time do you devote to that? As you start dating someone, how interested are you in spending more time with them? You know, is this like, see you next month? Or is it like, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? And what social conventions are you willing to break to achieve your purpose, right? So I mentioned the get a job at a bank or Home Depot, and that is not an exhaustive list. I'm just giving examples. But there are many more. So I know a young lady who's in her very early 20s right now, and she's willing to date guys 10 years older than her. And because she's sorting by these other attributes of maturity, success, whatever, she gravitates towards that. It's not that she's looking for people who look older, but she's orienting herself to experiences with people who have their lives figured out, and lo and behold, they tend to be 10 years older than her, right? Okay, this is a good pivot point. So I heard a story where a younger lady was early 20s, was doing whatever to meet guys, and she was approached by a guy. They went on a date, and he looks young for his age, but she started to get clues that he was older than she thought. And so she said, "How old are you?" And he's obviously a beta, because instead of just straight up telling her, he did this long-winded thing about how old he was. But it was funny to see the reaction, or to hear the reaction of her conveyed through another person telling the story, who also obviously had a reaction. And so the guy was 37, and the lady was, 15 plus years younger than that. But the interesting, about 15 years younger, yeah, give or take. So the interesting thing is that the lady was super impressed by where this guy was in life, all the things he had accomplished. He had professional accomplishments out the wazoo, and obviously was using his time wisely, but he was never married. He was a churchy guy, and this lady is interested in churchy guys, which you probably already know my opinion on. But it was interesting to me that the person wanted all these accomplishments, yet was grossed out by his age, especially because the guy did not look old. And then I saw pictures. The guy looked like he was maybe 4 years older than her. So what's the deal? Now, caveat, I think someone who's 37 has never been married, that's a huge red flag. And the excuse of, well, I've been busy with school and career, insufficient. There's something wrong with that person, that guy. And you have to have a reason why. It's like, justify to me why you're not messed up if you're in this boat. That's going to be offensive to 37-year-old guys who've never been married. Oh, well. And if they're divorced, my perspective is that no woman should mess with a guy that's been divorced. That's most men are failures, but someone who couldn't hold a marriage together, you have to have all the more reason to believe that things are different than you should believe they are. I'm not saying divorce is a one-sided event, always. Sometimes it is, but it's not always one or the other. But if you have any other options whatsoever, the relative difference in the likelihood of success is enormous. So I'll get to that point in a minute, though, with the age. The point I want to focus on here is you can't have it all. When you, as a young lady, you write out everything you want in a man, you're not done. You have to rank that list by importance. And then you have to go through it and think about which things on your list might compete with each other. So, for example, if you want him to make bucks and you want him to be 22, you probably get to pick one of those. If you want him to be masculine and you want him to be 21, you probably have to pick one of those. Now, the money one's probably obvious. Most men in their 20s do not, and this might be a shocker, never will make enough money for you to have children, let alone stay at home. It's not going to happen. Most men in their 20s today will never own a new car, let alone a house, because they're just not doing what it takes to be successful in a system that is depressed and is going to get a lot worse and is getting worse in real time. So you have to prioritize. What about that manly one that I said? That might shock you. You might say, what? You can either pick young or manly. I've made a series of videos about testosterone decrease and how that's getting a lot worse with each year. Well, it's getting 1% worse with each year, but cumulatively, it's already pretty extreme. Now, those videos, not a lot of people have watched them. I'm hoping that's because you already understand why it's important and that it's happening. I fear that people just don't want to add that to their plate. It's a really big deal. The average 20-ish-year-old young man has the same level of testosterone as someone who's around 65 today, on average. You think about that. So if a 20-year-old woman would be grossed out by a 65-year-old man, it could be for a variety of reasons, some of which I happen to believe are very good reasons, okay? But it also could be the fact that he's on the tail end of his life. Now, people die as they get older. People get sick as they get older. But there's a really big difference between a kind, gentle old grandpa and a rip-roaring 24-year-old man who's going to clear land and build a cabin and change the world, right? If you jump straight from kid to old man, that's a big problem. And I just don't meet a lot of people who seem to grasp how big of a problem that is. One real problem with this, whether you favor this like brawny man or not, the paper towel company with like the plaid shirt and the beard and the axe, who's a mover and a shaker and he's going to get things done. And by the way, testosterone has a massive impact on a man's ability to handle stress in a positive way. So it's a whole lot of motivation and strength against adversity. But maybe you don't care about all that. Okay, fine. Do you care about having kids? Because young men with low testosterone tend to struggle to have babies. And a whole lot of them even have dysfunction in the physical act. They struggle to get aroused. And so you can look at the statistics. Again, I've posted these things on my blog and in videos. It's a really big deal. And so pick one. Is that on your list? Like, do you want to have sex with your husband? Do you want to have kids? Do you want your husband to be a masculine man? Or do you want to marry an old man? Like, go marry a real old man, and at least then you'll have money, right? Because a 20-something's not going to have money either, young 20-something, right? So you get to pick one. Do you want to hold on to this idea that ideal relationships are with someone your same exact age? Or do you want to actually be happy? Because you get to pick one of those. Those are competing. You understand? So this is the importance of sorting these things. So maybe you don't like hearing facts, and maybe you disagree with my perspective. That's fine. It's not ideal, but whatever. But whatever facts you find, and whatever your perspective might be, you need to list what's important to you, and you need to prioritize that list. Because the odds of you getting everything on that list are basically zero. More importantly, you're going to have to look for the people that check those boxes. They're not going to come to you. They can't. There is no way that a high-quality man can find a high-quality woman today. He can respond to a high-quality woman, but there's nothing he can do to go find one except be the best person he can be and hope that that beacon, that she responds to that light. Because as a man becomes exceptional, he becomes more visible. As a woman becomes exceptional, she becomes less visible. She's not going to be on Instagram. She's not going to be spending her time writing books and having like a YouTube presence, right? But a man will. A man's going to start businesses. A man's going to write books. A man's going to make a name for himself. He's going to be in the community. He's going to be that prolific young electrician that just set up shop in town and is busting it out, right? That's going to be noticeable. You have to find them. Now, you don't have to do all the work. You just have to take the first step. I want to make that very clear. Like you go to the networking event, you say hi, you're done. You're done. That's all you got to do. If the man's high quality, he will respond and take it from there. If he doesn't do anything, he's a beta, and you're better off without him. Or he doesn't like you, and maybe you need to lower your standards or increase your quality. It's really that simple. So if you're a young lady and you're single, the question is, what are you doing about it? And you need to realize it's your fault, period. It's your fault. So what does that translate to? You need to think about what you're doing and not doing. Think about the ratio of your quality to the quality of man you're seeking for and see if that's a little jacked up. But that's basically, you just need to think about the changes you can make and make them. There is no young woman who should be single. There are plenty of young men who have no business getting married. There aren't any young ladies who don't have a path to finding a guy. I mean, unless, you're a 100% burn victim or something, you don't have arms and legs, there's probably still 10 guys that would marry you. So you just got to find them. But anyway, it's very, this isn't happy news for people that want the reason to be the guy's fault. But it's not the guy's fault. There are guys out there who would be interested. And coming back to this, I don't think I made this point clearly enough. I'm certain I didn't. When I was talking about the importance of giving signs that you appreciate his value, you might think, it's like that Cars song, you might think I'm crazy, which you probably do, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. You might think that what guys are after are women that they find exceptionally attractive physically. Look, it certainly helps. It certainly helps. I'm going to tell you something. This is not my idea. This is from a friend of mine. Back in the day, he's not a friend of mine anymore. But his threshold for physical attraction, I believe I've shared this before, was, am I going to struggle to have a baby? You could put 2 and 2 together there, or 1 and 1 in this case. A high-quality man, the baseline threshold for that is way lower than you probably think. It's not that beauty doesn't matter, because it does. It matters a lot. It's the fact that a high quality man knows that that's a fleeting thing. And he's going to try his best to evaluate you absent of your physical qualities, and just consider whatever you've got there to be icing on the cake. The cake is, like I said before, what you're willing to recognize, receive, and make use of that he provides. Because he is going to denominate his joy in terms of your joy. He's looking to maximize your happiness. That's his purpose. And that makes him happy. It's not like, oh, woe is me, I'm a martyr. My purpose in life is just to serve another person. That's genuinely what gives him joy. That's how God is. He genuinely feels joy in our joy. The kicker is he actually feels more joy in our joy than we do. And that's how a high quality man is. And it's real. This really happens. There are people like this, I'm telling you. Okay? So, the big point I want to underscore with this is, I'm losing it. I got to get back to it. The greatest qualification that you have for a high quality man, it does not lie in things that are outside of your control. It lies in the choices you make. And the greatest of those choices is going to be the set of things that could be construed as signs that you will value his value. I would hope that the opposite's also true, right? So that young women will be looking for men who value their value. That's a different conversation, because it'd be a long one, but it's certainly true this way. So some of those things are decisions you can make in the moment, like how to find him and how you respond to him when you meet him. But other parts of this are going to be lifelong processes. And so if you've wasted your youth fooling around, he's not going to be interested. The ship has sailed, sorry. And it's not that, your life is ruined because you can never turn around the ship. It's that water under a bridge can't come back, right? If he's looking to maximize the value he can impart, that is absolutely time constrained. And women change over time. We could go into that. I've done it before. It's a long topic, okay? So your age is certainly going to be one of the metrics of whether you value a high quality man or not. That might sound weird, but I think I already explained it enough. If you have a question, let me know. So anyway, but the point is, for the most part, the greatest qualification you can offer to a high quality man is how much you value him. It's more important than any of the things you might think are important. He certainly doesn't care what your career is and how much money you make. He doesn't care how many countries you've traveled to or any of that other garbage, right? If anything, those are negative indicators of value. Because if you choose to go to college, it means that's your purpose instead of finding him. You're doing this backup plan because you're not all in. Certain things in life that are highest value require 100% of your focus, and they won't share with other pathways, with other things you could be pursuing. Just like if he's already dating someone, you don't have a chance, right? We'll get to that. But there are many things in life where you can just pick one. So anyway, the greatest qualification you can offer is his recognizing his value, and most of that will entail decisions you're making right now. So that should be a ray of hope. I'm not sure how it seems, but it should be a ray of hope, because you might say, like, well, I'm not the most attractive person in the world. Who cares? He's not going to care. As long as you don't look like Quasimodo, you got a chance. Now, how do you make that chance happen? The greatest example is Mary in the New Testament, in her, Mary Magdalene, in her relationship with Jesus. That's the pattern. If you show that you truly believe that his purpose and his character is more valuable to you than anything else, he's going to be very excited to have met you. So, all right. So now I just have a few more points, but one of them is really, you're not going to like it, but it needs to be said. So first point is don't fall into this trap of believing that somehow you're going to be the exception without being exceptional. So somehow you're going to end up with a completely different and better outcome, even though you're putting the same exact ingredients into the pie. Go look at the statistics, okay? If you want to find an exceptional man, which you should, it will make the biggest possible difference in your life, more so than anything else that you could do. There's no competition. It's obvious, okay? If you truly believe that, then every single thing in your life needs to be reconfigured to align with that outcome. And that's going to include decisions that make you an absolute weirdo. So you get to pick whether you want to be comfortable fitting into the background or if you want to take a stand and put yourself out there. Because you can't have both. And if you're just going to be a wallflower, you're absolutely not going to find a high quality man today. It's just not going to happen. Okay? You might think that you do. And anyone with even an ounce of wisdom is going to look at that guy and look at you and say, well, I know where this is going. She's going to regret this. It may be as soon as a week after the wedding. I've seen it. It's terrible. Might be before the wedding, but, this happens a lot. But you might think that you're the exception. Maybe you're 3 years in, 5 years in. Well, guess what? The writing's going to be on the wall, and you might not figure it out till you're 40. And it will be far too late to fix anything after you've sealed the deal. Because like I said, I didn't say this part. I said high-quality women should not consider divorced men unless they have really good reasons. High-quality men should not consider divorced women. No caveat. I guess the only caveat is you always do whatever God commands you to do. But you should be really sure that it's what God wants. Like you can set a threshold on revelation tests on that one. Like Gideon did the fleece, maybe get yourself a fleece. Even if it's one of these fleeces, you put that sucker outside and let the dew get on the wrong side. But you better be dang sure, okay? If you want to be better, you're going to need to be different. You've got to go find them. All right, and now we have to talk about a very uncomfortable topic very briefly. And we need some legal disclaimers. So when I say in any use of the word polygamy, unless otherwise explicitly clarified, I do not mean any legal relationship. You could assume that what I mean is something like a plural relationship that is not legally bound in any way. Now, why do I have to make this ridiculous disclaimer? Well, there's a whole set of dumb laws on the books that are really old that no one looks at until they're trying to find a way to get you. And one of those is called solicitation of bigamy. And if you talk, is a word of caution to people out there, if you speak openly about polygamy, technically you could be charged with that crime. Even if you're not encouraging anyone to do it, even if you're actually doing quite the opposite, if you get anywhere near that third rail, you really, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an attorney, but there are many ridiculous laws out there, and we should be careful. So that caveat given, here is how polygamy eases this problem. A lady has the choice of finding someone who's already doing what she's looking for. Single men past 30, I should say this a different way. High quality men are not going to be single very many years into their adult life. They're going to get out there and get it done. They're going to find someone who's sufficient to marry. They're not going to be sitting there waiting till they're 37. Okay? So, the older you get, the fewer the single men will be. And also, the higher quality you are, the fewer qualifying single men there will be. There will be. I did an analysis on this somewhere where we just isolated IQ alone, because it's quantifiable, to show that it was something like, now I can't even remember the relationship, but basically as a woman's IQ increases, the set of men who have a higher IQ than her, it decreases much more rapidly. And that's because of differences in the two curves. But the point is that every increment of quality in a woman, it shrinks the set of compatible men much faster than that rate of increase. And so the higher quality woman you are, the harder it's going to be to find a single man who qualifies for you. So this comes down to one of those rank your options and pick what you really care about. Because if a monogamous relationship is very high on your list, then the quality of that man might have to be lower than it would otherwise be. Now, if you can disprove this through your own experience, then that's great, right? That's awesome. However, if you're on the beginning side of this equation and you're just talking about what you hope might be true, that doesn't cut the mustard. So you're going to have to find a way to hack the statistics. And the question is, how are you going to do that? Now, I happen to believe that there are an awful lot of things that you could do that young ladies aren't doing en masse yet, and therefore you could be the first to the trough. But they're figuring it out really quickly. And I'm telling you, as things progress, it's going to be even harder. So, now that being said, I want to clarify that, and this has been my position for many years, if anyone is thinking about any sort of polygamous relationship, I mean a plural relationship, not polygamous marriage, but any sort of plural relationship, and also to be clear, I mean polygynous, one man, multiple women. Odds are that you're thinking about it in the wrong way for the wrong reasons, and it's probably a really, really, really bad idea for you. So, in all the things I share, I am not filtering things out based on majority expectation, my expectation of the majority. I'm trying to share things that a very few people need and will not be able to get anywhere else. That's my objective. If anyone else can pick from that and find things of value as a subset of the rest, fine, great, right? So what I say about plural relationships is certainly of that caliber. I can't enumerate examples of people in this situation where I think it's been the best thing they could do. So odds are that almost anyone who would go for this would be making a mistake. I'm aware of situations people have kind of poked around with this, trying to see if, a guy, if he could find some lady who'd go for this. And they really just kind of look at the bottom of the dumpster as far as people go, because only crazy or very low quality people would walk into that with the set of understanding about it that is common. And sure enough, that's the case. They're crazy, or they're really dangerous, or whatever. But I think that the focus here should be very high quality ladies who don't have access to very high quality men. And so if you're not a very high quality man, you're off the list, right? So anyway, those are some brief thoughts on that. That's not at all meant to be an exposition, a full A to Z treatise on the idea. I bring it up because one reason for us refusing to consider things being harder than we'd like to think they are is that if we push too hard into that and we see it as impossible, we will just throw out all the ideas and pretend we didn't hear it. And that's no good. If anything, maybe what I'm trying to say is maybe this is a piece of evidence for there's always a way with this. If you're a young lady who has not lived a completely trashy life, there's absolutely a path to marriage for you if you're willing to pay the price. And that price is not necessarily some kind of plural relationship. But I'm just saying there's a basket of ways this could work. And most of those absolutely are, this is the broad bottom of the pyramid that everyone should think about is what more can you do to actually meet these people, and think about what makes them high value so that you recognize them and pay the price when you meet them. And that's just straight up single, typical relationship situations there. Okay, monogamous people. So anyway, that's probably sufficient food for thought. But increasingly you can pick the things you really want or the things that aren't as important, but you won't be able to pick both. And before this very long ramble, I preface this by saying that relationships are nice because they're fruitful, they're visceral, and they're a fruitful alphabet, a vocabulary for us to understand and think about many other situations. And it's certainly the case in a broad perspective in life that as we head into the end times, you're going to need to be willing to pay a higher price for the same old stuff that everyone seemed to have before for a much lower price. That's a staple. And it's not going away, it's going to accelerate. That's not a grand ripoff. It's actually a tremendous blessing, because if you want to see what happens to the joy of people who get things for cheap or free, just look around. Just look around and you'll find that we are swimming in greater unmerited prosperity than any prior generation. And yet people are more miserable than they've ever been. So maybe paying a higher price for the same old things isn't so bad, is it? Anyway, I hope this is helpful, and hopefully not too many minds explode by my bringing up plural relationships. But I don't really care. If your head explodes, so be it. Take care.